Hello, good evening. I'm Emily Gibson, and this is Caitlin McFarland, and we're the co-founders of ATX Television Festival, and we're still on the couch. But we're very excited for tonight because it's first for us, a fully fan event to just geek out over a series we love.
An iconic series. Whether you want to admit it or not, it shaped us, it affected us, it's a part of our culture. So hopefully you joined us for the watch party ahead of this conversation. We may be stuck at home, but at least we can still watch TV together and talk about it. And now as we get settled in to talk about it with the utmost authorities on TV, pop culture, and of course, Beverly Hills 90210.
Today we're celebrating Tara Ariano and Sarah D. Bunting, two longtime members of the ATX TV family, and their amazing feat of writing a book and then launching it.
During a pandemic. We're just rolling with it, but be sure to look in the show page notes for links on where to go buy their book. That's where we'll have all the details.
Sarah and Tara have also brought us a moderator we've been trying to get to Austin for years, the one and only Linda Holmes.
So this is how it's going to work. The ladies are going to join us momentarily for a conversation on the series, their book, and their ultimate fandom. Then towards the end, our audience, yes, we have a live audience here, we'll get to ask questions both written in the Q&A section of the Zoom and a couple out loud.
With that, let's bring them all out. First up, Linda Holmes, your moderator. And then co-authors Tara Ariano and Sarah D. Bunting. Hello. Okay,
we're gonna get when it works.
I know, exactly. Step one already. We're gonna disappear and you guys take it away.
All right, so if you don't know me, I work at NPR. I'm the host of Pop Culture Happy Hour, but in 2001, I was an unhappy lawyer working in Minnesota, and my very favorite website was called Television Without Pity. At the time, it was called Mighty Big TV. And I wrote an email saying I would love to write for you someday because a couple of my college friends had said, why don't you write for these people? And I said, I would never be able to do that. I could not do that. But I loved it so much that I took the chance. And in the fall of 2001, I started working for them, and I made my way to the Toronto airport, where I met, waiting for me with a sign that said Holmes, literally, in the airport. I met Sarah D. Bunting. Sarah, in addition to being the co-creator of Television Without Pity and of, previously .tv and all other things, as well as, of course, the co-host of Again With This, Beverly Hills 90210, the podcast, and Extra Hot Great, also a great podcast, is my dear pal, and we have known each other almost 20 years. So, Sarah, welcome and congratulations on this wonderful book.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is so exciting.
It is so exciting. And of course, Tara Ariano is, in addition to having many credits in common with Sarah, previously .tv and Extra Hot Great, and Again With This 90210 and Television Without Pity, of course, is also the co-creator of the beloved site Fame Tracker. So welcome, Tara. Wonderful to see you, my friend of also 20 years.
Hi, good to see you too.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, when you set out, well, we're going to go back to your origin story in a minute, but first, when you set out to do an episode by episode podcast about Beverly Hills 90210, did it feel plausible that you would actually finish the whole thing?
Shall we take turns? I'll go first.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. I thought we would get through it. Linda, you will remember that initially we did 2 episodes a week because we thought we'll never get through it. And I remember when we switched to 1, you were mad.
I was sad. I wasn't mad. I was sad.
You weren't mad. You were disappointed.
Exactly. I did.
We did eventually slow down.
Ish.
But I mean, it took us. We started in 2015, right? So it took us like 4 years.
Yeah.
And even then, we even protracted it longer because I think towards the end, that's when we started working in Melrose.
We started mixing in Melroses. That's right.
And
Right,
we even suspended the end of 90210 because then they did the revival last summer. So we
Nice.
stopped and did that.
Yeah.
God, that seems like 5 years ago. Anyway, yeah.
Mhm. It
Yeah.
really does.
I mean,
Well,
I don't think we ever sat down to try to map out like how long is it going to take us to do it. But I think it didn't seem like 4 years was the right number. It's
Yeah.
a lot of episodes.
It is a lot of episodes, because one of the things that you guys have talked about is that these were not like normal, like what we would think of. It's not just that, television now, you often have 10 episode seasons, 12 episode seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Back when we were children, when the earth was younger,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of seasons were 22 episodes, 23 episodes, 24 episodes. These guys had episodes had seasons that were like 30 episodes because they would run into the summer.
Right.
So there are a lot of episodes of this thing. When you talk about 10 seasons, I think there are 298 or something like that.
292.
It's really shocking. It's unconscionable in a way.
We close read every single one as our
You really did. You really did. And I will tell you,
unconscionable. Whew.
especially in the first, probably the first 5 seasons, I have probably heard those episodes of the podcast a couple times, which is why now I always recognize the sub music, because if I hear it in, I did a recent Melrose Place rewatch and they would use the same sub music, and the only reason I recognized it was that you've played it on the 90210 podcast.
You should explain for people that don't know. Sub music is when they have to come out with DVDs because they didn't think there would be a future when these shows would have an aftermarket. And so, at the time they would use contemporary pop music that they didn't get the rights to. And so now, these moments that you remember being scored to "Damn, I Wish I Was Your Lover" by Sophie B. Hawkins, when you buy the DVDs or watch them on Hulu, that song does not appear.
Yeah, it's like a waltz, and you're like, what? Like the 60s episode of 90210 in particular is like, there's just like this grunge light playing at a be-in, and you're like, why is this? Why are we being tortured in this manner?
Yeah. So Sarah, I'm going to go to you for people who don't know kind of your origin story with Tara and how the two of you became work wives. What is your sort of superhero origin story with Tara?
Well, we were on Danny Drennan's Mediarama site, which was him doing 90210 recaps. I think he started in the early in the Val era. And then he had bulletin boards, kids ask your grandparents, and there were all sorts of shows to talk about on there, and then also just like life stuff. So that's how we became friends. I mean, really, it's what's the expression? Like the strongest friendships are rooted in shared loathing or whatever. So we started calling each other to like have side bitch sessions. We had to, dial international, talk about ask your grandparents. And then Dawson's Creek started, and we were both complaining about it at such florid and detailed length that people on those bulletin boards were like, you guys should start your own recap site, possibly so we'd shut the fuck up about it and go somewhere else. Possibly because they legitimately wanted to read Danny Drennan style wrap up. So that's how we started Dawson's Wrap, which was only Dawson's. I think we started it a summer between. Yeah. So, and then that did well enough that we launched with Mighty Big TV the following summer, or the following September, which was 1999.
Yeah.
And, famously, like I've told this story a million times, that we were like the West Wing, like a, political show starring Rob Lowe. That's going to last 3 episodes. We just added it to the roster because we thought it was going to be terrible. And that was our mandate, was like guilty pleasure TV. So that's how that all started. And I think we'd been work married for a year before we even met each other in person. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember when I pitched you that I wanted to write for you, the email I eventually got was basically like, okay, so Jerry Bruckheimer is executive producing this travel show. We think it's going to last like one season, if that, but I was new. And, you know, it was like, you know, try this thing out. You know, you could try me out. I could try out doing the writing. Amazing Race still on.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean,
still
we had
on
no
today.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think any of us had any idea. But when you got back to 90210, how did it strike you when you went back for, you know, this at that time 25 years later sort of rewatch? My impression is when I listened to the episode about the pilot, you underestimated when you started how much you hated Brandon.
Over to you, Tara.
Yeah. I mean, I was always, if people who listen to the podcast know, I was a Dylan guy always, but Brandon, like at the time as a teenager, I thought he was fine. And I was the same age as the characters when it started. We all know, I shouldn't say we all know, people who watch the show know that when they started, they were in grade 11. And then in the second season, they were in grade 11 again, 11th grade. They were juniors twice. Because they also tried to protract how long they could keep them in high school, which made sense.
Yeah.
But he just seemed like, you know, a regular, like he was the nice guy. He was a sweetie. That's how he was presented to me. And as a, you know, dumb teenager, I was like, all right, sure, he's the sweetie. But, you know, when you watch it in your 40s, which I was when we started the podcast, it's like, oh no, he's the worst. He's terrible.
Yeah.
He is the worst kind of toxic masculinity because he thinks he's great. I mean, every time he will not pass an opportunity to tell someone else how great he is, in fact.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's exhausting, but it also makes for great podcasting and book fodder.
Yeah, it's true.
True.
Well, and it reminds me in some ways of Dawson, because it's the thing of the show being built around the idea that the guy is awesome, and people are constantly telling him he's awesome, and the show team seems to take it as like a given that he's awesome.
Yeah.
And then you watch and you're like, I'm not sure I think so.
Dawson's eventually, I think, figured out
They
that
did.
Dawson was a shit brick. I assume I'm allowed to curse on here. Guess we're gonna find out. And they sort of like corrected for that, and also like Vanderbeek was allowed to like be in on it a little more. Like,
yeah,
I just don't think 90210 ever figured out. And also, you got a bunch of like 62-year-old dudes in the writer's room naming multiple people Phyllis and using phrases like making it to talk about having sex. And it's like, yeah, oh, guys. Like, is Robert Evans in there literally smoking a cheroot? Like, what happens in there? But they never figured it out with Brandon.
It's a difference of sensibility too, with like at a certain point. I mean, Dawson's Creek, of course, comes from a gay creator, Kevin Williamson, and then later is taken over by another gay creator, Greg Berlanti. So it's definitely has there's a different sensibility behind it than I think was in evidence on 90210. And we certainly see that the 6 or 7 times 90210 tries to have, you know, any kind of queer or non-straight character, which it never goes well.
No,
for them.
No.
So I want to talk a little bit about the show after Brenda. How well do you think they were able to adapt to a post Brenda? I'll throw this one to you, Sarah. Adapting post Brenda.
Well, poorly. I think we all know that Tara, in her initial sort of relationship with the show, was like, no Shando, no Ariano, and peaced out, which checks out. But I think that was a problem, not just germane to 90210, but like I actually wrote a whole piece for Vulture one time about the difficulty of going to college for teen shows, and how only Felicity ever managed to be good at college because it started in college. Like you saw this with Buffy, you saw this even with Veronica Mars. Like there's just a transition there that's like there's a fundamental non-credible aspect to these people who shouldn't really know each other anymore. Like Andrea, I think, got a full ride to Yale, and there's absolutely no way that she would stay and like try to, well, she didn't even try to write for the Condor. But I just don't think that that was credible that this whole high school group would stay together. And that's just like a larger problem that has nothing to do with 90210. So they were already floundering before it was clear that Shando had to go. But the other really funny thing to me is, I mean, it's twofold. First of all, they bring Valerie in as the bad girl, and then they just debase her at every opportunity. And the other thing is that the whole production of the show is determined never to even acknowledge Brenda, basically, except like maybe she's with Dylan, maybe she's not. Maybe he ended up with her after Tony and that was great. Maybe he's bitter about it. Like the show to the end was determined to turn its back on the best part about its peak years. So it was bad at adjusting to Valerie, but it was also like pretty bad at everything else. And some of those things weren't its fault.
Yeah. I also think, go ahead, Tar.
I was just going to say the strangest part about the Brenda erasure is that she's related. She's the twin sister of a character who continues to be on the show for 4 more seasons.
Yeah.
So it's extremely weird that, you know, not only that she's never talked about, but that she's barely mentioned in passing with regard to like their parents coming back for his graduation, or, you know, after they also are exited from the show, which like no one minds that the parents are gone.
Yeah.
But like by the time we get to the series finale and like someone who was her best friend is getting married, and they're talking about like all these other characters are coming back or not, and like she is not mentioned at all. And she's on another Aaron Spelling show by this point. Like that's the weirdest part. It's like, you can't bury the hatchet for long enough to like have her come back and do one cameo. Come on, guys.
Even Brandon sent a video message from Chechnya.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed when I go back and I watch the ones kind of after Brenda left, and you guys talk about this quite a bit in the book and and on the podcast, is that there's also this funny repositioning of Kelly and Donna that is sort of this kind of like pull back and forth between them of like, I'm more adored. No, I'm more adored. And it just feels like there's such a, I mean, you guys have talked about it with Donna related to the kind of fluff fest that happened after Donna Martin graduates. It's not my word, but it's also true with Kelly. I think they went through this whole like Saint Kelly, special Kelly, when she was working with the AIDS patients, and she was, you know, had to be rescued from the cult and all that stuff. Like there was all this kind of, I just feel like they were maneuvering so hard to make those girls like the center girl of the show.
Yeah. And aspirational and wonderful, while not really realizing like Kelly became increasingly smug and hateful as the show went on. Donna is sort of like the comic foil, but is mostly inept at comedy. Yeah. It's just like you could have just put up with Brenda and kept Brenda, but no, wasn't to be.
And the problem is it feels like they used up all of their, you know, believable, relatable college stories in their freshman year. And then after that, they just get completely outlandish, like increasingly. Yeah. Where like by the time Donna is getting stalked for the second time, it's like, okay, guys, like this really should have ended probably.
Yeah. Well, stalked for the second time, but no one seems to remember she was ever stalked the first time. So it's sort of like
they remember long. I mean, I remember it, but like, it's probably that stalker who stalked me before. Only long enough for it to not be
right. But then, like in her management of it, like other people don't talk about it as if they're dealing with someone who's already been through this once, and it's sort of like. And there's one of the things I like about listening to the podcast is that you guys have a real eye, as I think you always have, for details like who walks up and surprises for fun a person who's just been stalked.
David.
Fucking David is who.
Yeah. And he shows up at some gas station roses and is like, so it's been 2 days. Do you think you could get out of your pajamas? Like, do you think you could not lose your half sister at the park?
Lost her at the park. That guy, man, that guy has a bad track record. It's sort of like, to me, when they started the show, you barely needed David, like in the very beginning of the show, because you can tell at the beginning of the show they thought they were going to operate on these 2 tracks, right? Which was like the track of freshman dorks and the track of like older kind of cool soapy kids. Yeah. And like they anticipated there would be some crossover between these freshman dorks and these older kids. But like, of course, in the original, David is a freshman and they are, as Tara mentioned, they're in 11th grade. So they're 2 years apart. And by the time they get to graduation, they've talked about David graduating early, but by the time they get to graduation, he's caught up by 2 years.
Yeah.
So they've tried to kind of collapse this all into one thing. You barely needed that character originally.
Yeah.
You really don't need him by the time you get to college, and he's such a jerk.
Yeah.
He's such a just sort of hostile, unpleasant, like, when do we ever like him? You know what I mean? Like, when is he likable?
Right.
Never.
No.
I'm thinking. Yeah, never. I mean, I think he has a couple of moments around Scott's death and around like dealing with Dylan. Like, one of his cool moments is like rolling up to Dylan after Dylan's father has passed with a squeaky toy.
I'm sorry. I don't want to take it away from him. That is my dog
totally
squeaking a squeaky toy.
Are we going to acknowledge that this is happening?
Here, you answer, and I'll mute.
And says, we're not really friends. We only have this thing in common. And this is awkward for everybody. So he has a couple of okay moments in there, but once he has to like really sort of turn on the jets to make up the coursework and graduate, and he's like short of sleep and everything, like that's when he starts being a nonstop pill, and it never stops. And then, oh my God, the music is like, it's just a nonstop source of suffering for us all, except switch it up, which is great. But
that's a good song.
He does go from, and we mentioned this in the book, they started on these 2 like Degrassi tracks, I would say. Younger, older kids. And then it was like, nobody cares about the younger kids, so let's just merge. But then they neglected to understand that no one cares about the younger kids, and that includes David, even though he taught Scott's cousin how to freak. I forgive nothing.
Mm-hmm.
True.
I would say the peak of David is when because he was filming the fashion show in season 1. And including Jackie's meltdown, and he goes to Kelly privately and is like, here's the 1 copy of the tape.
True.
Because that was a thing that could happen. Do with it what you will. I'm not going to promulgate this. But yeah, the rest of the time, like, and I think he's an underrated shitbag on the show. Like,
that's so true.
Everyone thinks about Steve as like, because he's more showy, like he gets more of the storylines, and we talk about this in the book too, of like, he's set up as the person who has to, suspect that the black kid on the basketball team is a ringer who's been brought in to blah, 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 blah. Like, so that Brandon can push against that and be the one who's right.
Right. And
but David is cool David doesn't get those issues plots or isn't involved in those, but he's just more interpersonally, like, just awful, mostly to Donna.
Yeah.
Yeah, the relationships on the show, to me, when you go back and look at them, very few of them seem remotely healthy. Like, very few of the long-term relationships seem at all healthy, which is, obviously in a soapy kind of situation that happens. But I feel like with this show in particular, you know, one of the things that you say on the podcast very often is you hate each other. Like, you know, looking at particularly like Kelly and Dylan when they were dating, you hate each other. Yeah. You do not get along. You're never happy. So why are you dating? And I feel that way about a lot of the relationships on that show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. And you don't even see it as much on Melrose now that we're doing that. It's like Allison and Billy don't even hate each other. They're just so boring. You can't even drift apart. But like, you know, Amanda and Jake, they don't hate each other. Mm-hmm. They have good chemistry. Like, they fight, but it seems like they fight about stuff that makes sense. And Joe
and it doesn't seem like as much like one of them is nasty to the other one, which is not the kind of unhealthy that all of the 90210 relationships are, but it's how some of them are. Like David and Donna, where he seems like he's so unkind to her so much of the time over the particularly once you get through the first year or two of their friendships. There's one where I think he says something to her like, "Why are you stupid?" or something like that. And all you hear on the podcast is Tara saying, "Okay, goodbye forever." And when I heard that, I thought the exact same thing. I was like, "Yep, goodbye forever."
Right. Yeah, it's the same problem that pushes me away from like the Housewives shows, where it's like you are only talking to each other because producers have made you go to this fake event so that you could all have fights with each other there. Like this is the problem with long running primetime shows. It's like, if this were real life, you would all lose each other's numbers. This is the problem that Sarah was alluding to with regard to, you know, the high school kids all going to the same college. It's like, when you go to college, even if you are at the same college as a lot of the people that you went to high school with, you meet new people and then you start hanging out with them and you make new friendships.
Right.
You drift apart.
Whoops.
But on a hey, Brian. But on a soap that can't happen, which is why then they, you know, you have to just keep doing the remix of different people for different dumb reasons, and, you know, Val dating David and then breaking up with him and then dating him again. Problems that they had never happened. And, you know, we're not saying anything new that people don't know about how TV works, but it's especially frustrating with characters that you've lived with for this long, when some of them you want better things and others you want them to like fall in a volcano.
It's totally true.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. As you have started in on Melrose, so as you both know, I think I recently finished a complete Melrose rewatch.
Fast.
It's quarantine, baby. So
that wasn't a criticism. I was like amazed. Like, wow.
So I was envious, actually. I was like, oh, we're still mired in this. Like, they don't know what they're doing.
And here's the thing is that the Melrose is like in the early going kind of boring, right? Because at first they wanted to be like the grown up version of 90210. So at first it was like, what's it like when you know, have a young marriage that's struggling? What's it like when you have to work all the time and you can't be with your spouse? And there were stories about like, you know, homelessness and things like that. Not in exactly the 90210 way, but they thought they were going to be a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Which they did not execute well, so it's super boring. But when you get to like the middle of Melrose Place, which ran for like 7 seasons or something like that, by the time you get to the middle, and then especially like later, it gets just bonkers. Absolutely. It is so much nuttier than I remembered. And when I got to it, all I could think was, it's like I would, if I were an eccentric dowager, pay for them to speed up and get to these episodes right now, because I cannot wait. It is so crazy. How have you found covering Melrose in its early seasons to be different, other than, as we talked about, Billy and Allison are just boring?
Sarah, you should go first.
Well, I think that because we started it, like, we had already been through the entire series run of Beverly Hills 90210. So there are definitely parallels in terms of like the first season of each being, in 90210's case, it's like more PSA stuff. Like, you should check your breast for lumps. You should, you know, not assume that everyone's been tested for AIDS, HIV, STDs, etc. Here's what happens when you get robbed at gunpoint. So they were trying to be a little more servicey, but then it quickly became evident that nobody cared. Like, get to the, fuck works factory, whatever. So Melrose, same thing, but especially because they're in their 20s, it's like, here's a subplot about, I'm trying to think of one of the more boring ones, but like they all just fell directly out of my head.
Jake has, indifferent employment history. So there's a lot of stuff about him like trying to get a job and it's struggling.
Or like, here's how you balance the demands of medical residency and building management. Like, you don't is how. So then once they finally figured out, first of all, we need the queen, Heather Locklear.
Right.
Second
Absolutely.
of
all hail.
Thomas Calabro has many gifts, and being this sort of like goofy, lovable figure is not on the list. 3, let's just start remixing all the couples. And and now someone's on parole and they're at a reunion and now he's dead and now she's trying to date while pregnant with dead guy's kid. Like, that's the stuff. Like, it's a Monday night primetime soap. No one's here for issues plots. It's a soap.
Yeah.
Suds it up. So, but for us, like, I think having been through the 90210 cycle first, I think we're both more and less tolerant of certain soapy aspects of it. But I, for one, was extremely impatient for them to just like, when is Amanda getting here?
Mm-hmm.
When are Rhonda and what's her face, Sandy, leaving? When is Sandy taking her, Southern Jersey Belle accent and ridding us of her?
What was that accent, man?
I don't know. It's like someone tied Chattanooga to a bottle rocket and set it loose in Lodi, New Jersey. I don't know. No good is what it was.
For me, it's different because I was, as I said, I was a 90210 person, and I watched Melrose Place. I dipped in and out of it, but in its bonkers years, I was in college by then, and so this was in the pre-DVR era, so it was not appointment TV for me, and I didn't record it, so I was aware of like the big plot lines as they happened, but I was not a regular watcher. So some of this is new to me, which is fun and exciting. And Sarah is right. Like, we were super excited for Amanda to come, but we were just saying when we were recording this week's episode, like the X factor that people forget is also how good Sydney is. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
For
Laura
sure.
Layton.
For sure. For
Scam.
sure.
Yeah.
So good. So good. And she is so much a part of sort of, to me, she is the one who, when she eventually leaves, it destabilizes the show in the same way as Shannon Doherty leaving 90210.
Yeah.
It feels like the show has it feels like the show has no center. The show kind of has no it loses a lot of its most interesting dynamics, its most watchable dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if you try to figure out, for example, if you try to figure out whether Michael and Sydney, what their actual relationship is and whether they like each other, it's not a healthy relationship by any means,
right?
But it's a sort of an oddly interesting relationship, which I enjoy watching. And now that you guys are right at the point in these episodes where he's about to sort of start to give in a little bit to her, temporarily, I find that really interesting. And she is so good. She is so
really good. I mean, the character as written is, I think, just like a borderline personality, probably. Again, not a doctor, but she has this way. I think the first time I watched it, I had like no empathy for this character, but watching it again, like, I forget who. Oh, it was Amanda Peet talking about, she was in season 2 of Dirty John. She's playing Betty Broderick. And in this interview, she's like, you have to keep in mind that mental illness is not a playable action. And I think about that a lot watching Laura Layton. And also, if you think about it, I think that's what some of what I respond to with Shannon Doherty and some of her choices as Brenda Wash. that
Brenda Wash.
I don't think that Shannon Doherty is nearly as talented as Laura Leighton, but there is something that she gets into, there's just a relatability that she taps into that a lot of her castmates couldn't. That Jenny Garth just doesn't have that ability. Possibly it's the anus situation. And I would say the same about Laura Leighton's castmates, but there is something, Laura Leighton's SVU appearance is classic. This character is despicable, and yet you recognize something in her. And I think both of those actors understand that mental illness is not a playable action. Like a character trait is not a playable action. So I think about that a lot.
Yeah. The other thing that makes I think Shannon Doherty's performance as Brenda maybe better than some of the others that went on longer is that it did not go on longer. She had a shorter time for the writers to be consistent with her. If she had stayed on the show longer, she would have gone through more evolutions, I'm sure. And I
think that's right on.
They would have done crazier things to her that would have probably betrayed what we like about what makes her so consistent in the years that we see. But Sarah's totally right. She understands the psychological reality of what it is to be Brenda Walsh in that family and relative to that brother and those parents and
absolutely
what drives her to the decisions that she makes and how she wants to distinguish herself from him, and that he gets approval for doing nothing, and that she she's driven to want to get that from her parents in ways that are sometimes unhealthy, sometimes make sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it wasn't until I was watching it more recently that I really realized how much Jim and Cindy, which bless Jim and Cindy, lovely people, lovely actors. I think I didn't really realize how differently they parented those two kids, and how the show just kind of absorbs it as something Brenda complains about. But I don't know that the show absorbed it the way you guys have pointed out. When Brandon first had sex, it was very much use a condom, have fun. He did it in the house. Use a condom, have fun.
And then the show has this boom boom ba-da ba-doo ba-da thing happening
right,
this morning.
Exactly. Jim and Brandon shooting hoops and talking about how cool it was. Yeah. And when Brenda is about to have sex, Jim acts all of a sudden somebody is going to break his precious glass sculpture. It's this sort of much more, I'm sorry, but it is this much more patriarchal, in both ways, possessiveness kind of routine about her sexuality, which this is one of the things I like about the way you guys talk about this show and the way you talk about Dawson's, is that on the one hand, getting upset about the behaviors of some of these characters feels silly, but at the same time, it tells you what messages we all were getting at that time. We were all relatively, we had all been adolescent girls not far from the time that this show was out. And, this is, you realize
at exactly that time for me.
And it's you were poaching in it. You would have been poaching in it. And it's if you didn't notice it on 90210 at the time, would you have noticed it in your own life or the life of your friends at the time? Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. And it's not just their sex lives either. It's anything that is sort of important emotionally and psychologically to Brandon is treated with the gravity of, black letter law, including when he's screaming at multiple clients of his father's about issues he learned about 7 minutes prior.
Right.
When Brenda is emotional about something, it's just Brenda being dramatical. Mm-hmm. And it's okay, yeah, that's true. But the same people who created this character that way are also throwing her under the bus for these traits that they gave her that are very, they made her a hysteric and then they string her up for it. So thumbs down on that. And on Brandon, don't scream at your father's clients.
Yeah. The episode where they almost destroy the Peach Pit to put up a mall is Brandon's worst episode in my opinion. Like, he's so bad so many times, like in different conversations with different people. If you've never watched that episode, find the one where where Brandon is all upset because his dad's client is going to knock over the Peach Pit and build a mall. It is the worst one.
Yeah.
It is the
Walton
worst
Goggins
one.
is in it.
Yeah.
Walton Goggins is in it. Oh my gosh, there are so many
And
people
Liz
who pop
Vassy.
up in. Yeah, Liz Vassy. There are a lot of people who pop up in some unexpected places in these shows. So as you put this book out, how did you, this is the only question about the book itself that I'm going to ask you, because I like asking questions about 90210 too much. How did you split up episodes to write about? I know that you have worked together for so long that I always wonder whether that kind of thing just happens like by osmosis, that there are so many processes now for splitting up work. But what did that look like? The picking out of there are 93 episode summary descriptions, sort of like a short version of a recap. How did you split them up?
Tara, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We wrote 100. It was originally, we were contracted to do 90 for the book, and we did 100 so that we would have options for cuts. And then so the 7 that didn't make it into the book for space reasons, we will be we'll be narrating them and dropping them on the Again With This podcast feed every Thursday. So if you are a listener of the podcast and you want those deleted scenes from the book, you can subscribe to the podcast and get those Again With This, wherever podcasts are podcasting. It happened pretty naturally. I think it was pretty, we remembered from having, by the time, we got to the book, we had already covered them on the podcast. So, one or the other of us would have a strong affinity. And so when it came time, as we got to each season, we would sort of say, which ones do you feel the most strongly about? And then if one or the other of us said, I have to do this one, the other would defer. I think, in season 2, Sarah got most of the Emily Valentine ones. It just shook out that way.
Yeah.
I got a lot of like the big Brenda ones.
Yeah.
That's my girl.
And then because I'd already written the series premiere, I think Tara, we knew she would take the series finale.
Yeah.
And then we had some sidebars to think about, and it was like, all right, let's just split these up. But again, we've been doing this half our lives. So it's like, okay, here's this task that has to be split into 2, and we just have like very almost lizard brain processes for making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think we chose well. I think it worked out.
Yeah.
Usually does.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask you a couple of questions that came in from the audience. So what is each of your favorite episode and why? Love you all. I refer to my husband as my best friends since I listen to your podcast regularly. All right. Tara, I'm going to go to you first. Favorite episode?
Favorite episode. I have to say, honestly, I think it's the one that we're going to be covering for that we just did the chat on. It's Back in the High Life Again, where Dylan finally, after spending most of season 3 dithering between whether he's going to choose Kelly or Brenda to date, decides it's going to be Kelly. Almost instantly regretting it, actually. As plays out. But then Kelly says she can't go forward dating him publicly until they tell Brenda about the Summer of Deception, and so they drive her to a park and tell her, and she says, "I hate you both. Never speak to me again." And it's great. And as I say in the book, the reason is that often on TV, when characters break up, because you have to keep liking whoever the dumper is, the writers have to like finesse it so that, it's mutual, or they pretend that it is, even on a teen show, so that, the audience doesn't turn on them. And this is like one of the few cases where there clearly is an offender, and the offendee is like, no, you know what? Fuck both of you. It's great. It's the signal Brenda moment. And for that reason, I think that's probably my favorite episode.
It reminds me of on the slumber party episode in which they're all insisting that it's not a slumber party. There's a moment where Brenda is trying to be like super, super nice to this girl that Kelly brought to the party. And then finally Brenda turns to her and is like, why are you being such a bitch? It sort of comes out of nowhere. It's this sort of like sudden explosion of temper. And I love it. It's my favorite part of that. It's my favorite part of the episode. Sarah, what's your favorite episode? Sorry, Tar.
I was just going to say, it's always great in a soap when someone like acts like a person would act, you know?
Yeah.
Because it happens so seldom. Go ahead, Sarah.
It's true. Oh my gosh, what is my favorite episode? I think it might be Slumber Party because everyone is finally who they are. There's a subplot in which Brandon and Steve are like siloed off with those like visible garter strap girls who steal his vet. It's like a classic Beb subplot and in which both boys are humiliated and also wearing 3-bedroom blazers in public. But Slumber Party is like so amazing. Like it's finally Donna at her most Donna that we've seen her so far. We get some like canonical information about like Ross, and he didn't even bring a blanket. Amanda is an icon. I'm sorry that we never saw her again. I guess she went back to like Hepburnia, where she's from, because I don't understand what that accent was about. But oh my God, that like mane of 90s curls and her like little tweed jacket and the like 501s hiked up to the nips there. And I'm a bitch. So good. And she really is. And then the ending is like almost offensive in how out of character and like it just does. It's not how disordered eating works.
Right.
But it's so satisfying that she's like, bring the whole box. Like, oh, all better. And then we never see her again.
Right.
Okay. Guess she got to that frat party after all. But like, yeah, I think it's just like way less complicated at that time, the show. And you don't have quite enough evidence of what like just assholes all these people turn out to be. Like everything is just like still normal. And then of course Andrea is wearing a Lance of Salzburg like suit of armor practically this nightgown. So yeah, that's a good one. I like that one.
Yeah. All right. So for both of you, where do you stand on last summer's reboot? Questioner says, personally, I loved it and thought it was much smarter than it got credit for. I was disappointed it didn't get a second season. While you answer this, I'm going to go take something away from the dog that he's not supposed to have, but I'll be right back.
Okay.
Sarah, you go first.
I liked it. I think it didn't understand what it was trying to do. And I didn't really understand like the fictionalizing of certain things. Like, but it also seemed to have an ear for some things that the fans wanted. And it had a certain wit to it at times. And there were these, it was weird. Like, I think the untimely demise of Luke Perry, R.I.P., managed to bring the cast together in ways that were positive. I thought Christine Elise's role in it was like really clever and amazing. And I kind of just wanted them to keep spinning her off and like, let's just watch that character. But I wouldn't have minded a second season either. Like it was sort of inessential, especially for people who don't like literally do what we do for a living. I was like, who is this for? Because if it's not for us, seriously, what the hell? But I mean, yeah, it was cute.
Yeah, I think I liked it more than you did. I think there are ways in which it was sort of frustrating. Like I would have preferred a straight sequel, like if it was just picking up with the characters that we know in their 40s. And I write this in the book too, because we have a sidebar at the very end where we talk about the spinoffs and, you know, other tie-ins and stuff.
Right.
But it would, and I think that the fact that every episode had a cold open where it was a different characters. I mean, the air quotes are the problem kind of, but different characters' fantasy of like themselves at their age back in high school, like in a different scenario from the original run of the show. And then it was like, oh, this is so cute. And then it's like yanked away into this sort of like backstage, you know, inside baseball-y, like here's what goes into mounting a revival. Like that's kind of interesting, but then not really. And then like the different cast members are like fictionalized to greater and less degrees. So there were aspects of it that were frustrating, but I agree with Sarah that like I also still really enjoyed watching it, even though I think it was made for like you, me, Linda, and 4 other people.
I think so.
But I think if it had gone on, there would have been a way that they could have like transitioned out of like the meta-ness and just made it into what the show within a show was.
Exactly.
You know? But I did think it was cute, like the way they introduced, like they let Jamie Walters have his moment too. I thought that was really funny and
Bless
like
his
a
heart.
nod for the fans of the show that know how the original run like did him dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought like Jenny Garth and Tori Spelling were like really honestly funny sometimes, like more so than they were in any of their like
God, so much more
Girls or other shit that they've tried to do. So, you know, it was definitely weird, but I would have liked to see more of it too. And I was disappointed, although, you know, do I want to see Brian Austin Green get another paycheck? Not really. So I wasn't mad about that aspect of it. Yeah. He's not a good person from what we hear. Allegedly sprinklings.
Allegedly. So this question is says relationships. I think that Andrea was a good foil to push against Brandon. Do you all wish that they were endgame romantically? I think Andrea should have stuck around to ground Brandon, but not romantically.
Okay, I'm going to start with this one because this is like,
please do.
Yeah. Not romantically, yeah, maybe. I agree they were good as friends, but I also think that the show ultimately would have made them endgame romantically if not for Gabrielle Carteris having gotten pregnant. Because I don't think there was a way that the show could have let him be the father of her baby, and they had to write the pregnancy into the show, and then that forestalled that storyline from ever happening. And then they wrote her out of the show, which was probably the right thing to do because they had nothing else to do with her character after the baby was born and she got married.
Yeah, they tried, but also Jessie, like what a punishment for her. Like at least have her stick with Jordan Bonner.
Yes.
Who was
Jordan.
Justice for Jordan.
Yes. Oh my God. Justice for Jordan. Justice for Deshaun. Justice for so many people.
I recently just put up a picture on Twitter of young Cress Williams as Deshaun, and like so instantly charismatic and amazing. Yes. So good, like good looking, like came onto this show and like got lectured by Brandon, and it's so ridiculous because he comes in as like this, like I said, he's like this charisma just like blast. And Brandon is like, I will talk to you about the importance of your studies. And it's like, go to bed, Grandpa.
Oh my God. Fucking low pockets being like, do you mean I'm supposed to take the test for you? And there's a moment in one scene where like they're in Deshaun's dorm room and Brandon is doing that like weird pocket hook in his jeans pockets thing and is braying at this guy who is at least 2 feet taller than him. And Cress Williams does this almost imperceptible like eye flick to camera that's like,
you kidding me with this shit? Yeah.
He just made a meal of it. And his chemistry with Tori Spelling, like what a shame. We say this in the book, but I will say it at every opportunity. Like that was just really a missed opportunity. Like they just had such easygoing, like even as friends, like give them, I don't know, a web series where they solve crimes. This is always my answer. It's like, it would be great if it was solve crimes, Bunsey, we know. Like, but seriously, solve crimes. It's not too late. He's Black Lightning. Have her come on the show.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, you get him on the show and he starts to interact with all the characters, and it's like, and none of the girls fell in love with him. I am so sure that he came to all these events and he was like hanging with the gang, and he came to Donna's stupid debutante ball. He came to Donna's stupid debutante ball in a tux, and all the girls were like, but Brandon. It's like, nope, they weren't. I do not believe it. No. Speaking of which, this question is somewhat related. So, Team Brenda for life, but listening to the podcast over the last 5 years has reaffirmed my middle school opinion that Claire was too good for all of those characters and should have been on a different TV show. Also, they should have sent Valerie to Melrose Place.
Interesting.
That is a
Yeah.
really interesting idea.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that sliding doors scenario. I agree. Someone asked us this last night recently on a trivia event that we had about which character should have gotten a spinoff, and I said Claire, because I feel like there was a lot of interesting stuff with her character that after they hooked her up with Steve, the writers kind of just forgot about.
Well, and it was all like, hectoring wife and, lunkish husband, sitcom-y stuff with them. It's like, and now there's a rowing race to win her heart. Like, what show is this?
Right.
Anyway.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
And she's so good. And like, she's one of the ones where like when they didn't massacre her hair, like when they didn't just completely make a mess out of her hair, just like so lovely to watch. Some of those women had supremely good hair.
Yeah.
Brenda did at times. Valerie does a lot of the time. Valerie's hair, Claire's hair at times. Just such a mwah. Other than the blondes, like a lot of those women, great hair.
Canada's own
right.
Kathleen Robertson.
Absolutely. So I think we are going to take a question out loud from Lynn, if this works. So Lynn,
Hi,
take
Lynn.
it away.
Hey, Lynn.
Hello, we the North. So hi, Tara from Southern Ontario.
Hi.
Oh, Ontario.
Woohoo! My question is Tara, you touched on this earlier about your feelings about Brandon watching it in your 40s. And I'm wondering, Sarah and Tara, did your attitudes change about other characters or storylines when rewatching?
I think almost all of them, but you go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. It's definitely a different experience. I mean, it's like the My So-Called Life problem where you watch it now and you're like, oh, I'm Patty. This is interesting.
Totally.
I think there's a lot of some of the teen bullshit. You can watch it and empathize with it the way you did when I at least was exactly their age watching it when it first aired, and then other stuff where it's like all of you need to be grounded for 5 years because you're terrible, awful children who are spoiled. But yeah,
well, this is the Donna Martin graduates problem also.
Absolutely, yeah. Over to Sarah because she wrote that one, so she should take that.
I mean, I think we always sort of felt, even watching this, and I'm like, 2 years ahead of these people in age or school, whatever. So it's like, it's against the law to drink if you're not 21, and they're making these announcements and the kids are all scandalized, like they expected a tray of joints and champagne to come out, and it's like, guys, but it really is amazing how the show expects you to side with not even just Donna, but like Brandon, because Brandon's like, well, now it's a cause, and you're like, but it isn't, because it's illegal and it was a stated rule that she broke, and she's graduating. She just doesn't get to walk with her class. Fitting punishment. Suck it up.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff like that, but there's also, I think I'm much more aware now of how sexist and just generally privileged the show is, and the ways in which the not so great white savior of Brandon, and I talked about this a little bit in the event we did last night, that great white savior thing they do with Brandon so consistently, and whenever someone on Twitter is like, please grant me the confidence of a mediocre white man, Jason Priestley's face is the one that pops into my head, because that character is just like, I heard about this, earlier today, and now I'm going to scream in your face. Bless. It must be nice to have no shame.
I thought of another one.
Go ahead, Tar.
I thought of another one that changed even like between when we did the podcast on it and when we wrote the book, which is toward the end of season 5, when Kelly chooses me, not me, when Kelly chooses Kelly, that at the time as a soap viewer, I was like, this is a violation of the compact between viewer and love triangle participant, which is when you have a choice, you have to choose. That's the rule. and then when it actually came time to, and also that it, you know, it's like such a legendary moment because it makes her seem so like a petulant child, like, it's neither of you, it's me, which is how I always thought of it in the intervening years.
And that's
But
how
when
it's
you
acted, to
right,
be fair.
yes, it is. It is, in fairness. It is how it's acted. But when you actually watch the episode, like, both of these fuckers are being so controlling.
Yeah.
Dylan, who's not even dating her, is like, I'm taking you on a trip around the world. And then Brandon hears about it and is like, surprise, I'm proposing, even though they've been like on and off for this whole season.
And puts the ring in a rollerblade. I just want to put that on the record again.
Because it's 1995.
I forgot that.
And that's how we were proposing in 1995.
That's a no
I
for
guess.
me. Big no for me, dog.
Right.
Man, oh man, I forgot that. Okay, and I would add, for me personally, any of the episodes that deal explicitly with race are disasters,
100%.
are absolute unmitigated disasters. Find the one where they all do the electric slide to fix racism. That's all I'm going to say.
Thick skin problem.
Yeah.
We only have a couple minutes left, but I'm going to give you a chance to answer this last one. What do you think is the biggest influence of the show on pop culture and television specifically?
Ooh.
It's a stumper.
Sideburns? I really don't know. Like, I think it's much more, I don't think there's like a specific thing necessarily.
Do you see a connection? Do you see a connection between it and not just Dawson's, but also like even up to now with like the CW superhero shows and how they're sort of set in young people's soapy world?
I mean, I think every teen drama that came after it is influenced by 90210 inevitably. And I think that the fact that Luke Perry was cast as a dad in Riverdale was like the most explicit nod to it. But I think there's a through line, you know, to Dawson's and to the OC and like to all of them that came afterwards. It was just such a titan, and it continued to be because it was on, and as soon as it was in syndication, it was never not in syndication, and it still is. It's still on like every day on Pop TV.
Yeah,
watch it whenever you want on Hulu too. Like it's so. And the funny thing is, like, I've been collecting old Sassy magazines in quarantine. This is my sick nostalgic habit. Don't bid against me on eBay now that I've said that. But and like just going through these issues, like starting as soon as it was out, it was like, and granted, this is like, you know, a particular kind of sample to look at, but it was just such. The impact it had was so great on all of culture, and I think it never stopped. Like when you say 90210, people know what you're talking about. Like there's a reason
true
that, you know, there was a Dr. 90210 terrible reality show about a soap opera guy.
Yeah.
Like the reason that's still a brand is because of the show. So you know, I think. And go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm done.
I think maybe it might have to do even more with timing and like the transition from the 80s, and like that was sort of like the golden era of the primetime soap, and then it became this hinge, and then the door sort of opened for not just it but My So-Called Life, which I think was like a reaction to it. And then this is also when like Fox had sort of been like bumbling along as a network for a couple of years, but now like the period between 90 and 2000, like I think that whether it was inspired by it or like in spite of it, a lot of things came out of the existence of 90210 in terms of making art for children and adolescents actually relatable to children and adolescents and not written by 62-year-olds named Dawn.
Yeah. And I mean, you can say Party of Five was probably a reaction to it too. That was on the same network.
Totally.
But we talked about this like when we were recently discussing Grosse Pointe, which is like the spoof of 90210. It's like the backstage sitcom that was set in a teen drama that sure resembles a 90210-y kind of show and comes from the same creator. That the WB could not have existed if 90210 was not a hit. And even though like Fox was at the time like getting out of the teen drama business, if not for that, we wouldn't have
Yeah.
WB, and then we wouldn't have the CW, and then we wouldn't have Freeform, and we wouldn't have 13
Yeah.
Reasons Why, and all of those teen shows on Netflix. Like, it just, I mean, if you drew the family tree, like, you would never stop. I think all of them
provided
can be
the business model totally for everything that came after.
Yeah. And I will say, as my closing thought, out of all of the character introductions that 90210 ever did, they loved to do the character introductions where they were like, this new person is a thing. There's only one that I think lived up to it, and that was in the second episode when they introduced Luke Perry, with the lean and the white tees and that kind of like funny, like slight squint that he has. It works so well. It works so well.
It did. We miss him.
We miss him. RIP, good man. You guys, this is so much fun. I appreciate you both so much. You know that coming to work for you was one of the most important pivot points in my entire life, honest to God. And it's always good to come and talk to you about your work, and I appreciate it enormously.
We love you, Linda.
Oh, we love you.
Oh, I love you too, guys. And thank you so much to everybody who's in the audience. We're so glad you could come. Yeah, we're so glad if you're in the audience now while we're talking about this, or if you're watching it later. You can find all of us on Twitter. You can find Tara at Tara Ariano. You can find Sarah at Tomato Nation. Look up their writing. Listen to not just Again With This, but also Extra Hot Great and Sarah's other podcast, Mark and Sarah Talk About Songs with Mark Blankenship, which I'll let you figure out what that could possibly be about.
Politics, nonstop politics.
We appreciate you guys. We all have built our careers on you guys and your willingness to read and listen. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to you guys so much. And thanks to ATX, of course.
Thanks to Emily and Caitlin and Laura. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thanks to you guys, and thanks to everyone that's been watching. This was so fun. I mean, this is why we created a festival, so we could sit around and talk about television for hours.
So fun to do.
And so we just appreciate it so much. I know our books are in the mail, and I can't wait to get it. And I also was like, oh my gosh, there's the thought of doing a full rewatch was very overwhelming, but the thought of you guys talked about and going back and watching those individual episodes, I'm like, yep.
Yeah, no, we cut it way down. So just like, cherry pick. It's don't do what we did. Watch the whole thing.
Oh my gosh,
there we go. There's the book.
It looks so good.
Illustrations by Julie Kane. She's the queen.
Yes, Julie's illustrations are beautiful.
Amazing.
Thank you all. Thank you, Linda.